My brother made my life hell, then got my wife pregnant. Marrying Rachel was the happiest day of my life. I remember standing at the altar, the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows, creating colorful patterns on the floor, and feeling like the luckiest man alive. Rachel was radiant in her white dress, her eyes filled with love and promise. In that moment, I believed that nothing could go wrong. We were invincible, or so I thought. 3 years later, that belief has shattered into a million pieces. I'm sitting in my car, parked outside a rundown motel on the edge of town, staring at the door to room 203. My hands grip the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles are white. I've sat there for hours, trying to muster the courage to face the truth I've been running from. In that room are my brother, Dan, and my wife, Rachel. And I had every reason to believe they were together. Dan and I had never seen eye to eye. Growing up, he had always been the rebel, the troublemaker, the one living on the edge. He thrived on chaos, dragging everyone around him into his mess. I was the responsible one, the one who always had to clean up after him, bail him out, and clean up the mess. Our parents were so busy with their own dysfunctional relationship, I became Dan's de facto guardian. It was a role I didn't relish but could never escape. When Dan showed up on my doorstep 8 months ago, looking for a place to stay after another failed job and a fight with his latest girlfriend, I should have known better. Rachel, ever the optimist, convinced me to let him stay with us. "He's your brother, Jake," she said, her eyes filled with compassion. "He needs help. Maybe this time, he'll turn his life around." I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, Dan could change. So, I let him in, against my better judgment, and that's when everything started to fall apart. At first, things seemed to be going well. Dan got a job at a local auto shop, started paying rent, and even seemed to be getting his life together. Rachel and Dan hit it off almost immediately, bonding over their shared love of old rock music and late-night discussions about life and the universe. I didn't think much of it. Rachel was always friendly, always willing to lend an ear. And Dan, well, he had a way of charming people. But then, things started to change. I began to notice the little things. A touch that lingered too long, a shared look that seemed to carry a deeper meaning, whispered conversations that abruptly stopped when I entered the room. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that I was being paranoid, that there was nothing going on. But the doubt kept gnawing at me, a persistent, insidious feeling that I couldn't shake. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago when I found a text message on Rachel's phone. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she was taking a shower, and it lit up with a new message. I knew I shouldn't have looked, knew it was an invasion of her privacy, but something compelled me to pick it up. The message was from Dan. "I can't stop thinking about you," it read. "Last night was amazing. I love you." My heart stopped. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I read the message over and over, hoping I had misunderstood, that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. I confronted Rachel when she came downstairs, her hair still wet from the shower. She looked at me with those big, beautiful eyes, and I could see the guilt written all over her face. She didn't even try to deny it. She broke down, sobbing, confessing that she and Dan had been having an affair for months. She said she didn't mean for it to happen, that it just did, that she had been feeling lonely and disconnected from me, and Dan had been there, always listening, always supportive. She said she loved me, that she was sorry, that it was a mistake. But her words felt hollow, empty. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The days that followed were a blur. I kicked Dan out that same night. He didn't put up much of a fight, just packed his things and left without a word. I thought that would be the end of it, that Rachel and I could somehow find a way to move past this, to rebuild what had been broken. But a week later, she told me she was pregnant. At first, I was overwhelmed with joy. We had been trying for a baby for over a year with no luck, and now, here it was, our miracle. But then the reality hit me like a freight train. The baby could be Dan's. My brother could be the father of my wife's child. The thought was like a knife twisting in my gut. I didn't know how to process it, didn't know what to feel. Anger, betrayal, fear, they all mingled together in a toxic mix that threatened to consume me. We decided to get a paternity test once the baby was born. Until then, we were stuck in this limbo, this agonizing state of uncertainty. I moved out of our bedroom, unable to sleep beside Rachel, knowing what she had done. I spent most nights on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. I wanted to hate her, wanted to blame her for everything, but the truth was, I still loved her. I didn't know how to stop, and I hated myself for it. Dan, on the other hand, I hated with every fiber of my being. He had always been a thorn in my side, but this was unforgivable. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, to make him pay for what he had done, but I didn't even know where he was. He had disappeared, like the coward he was, leaving me to deal with the fallout of his actions. And that's what brings me here, to this rundown motel on the edge of town. After weeks of searching, I finally found him. I don't know what I'm going to do when I see him. Part of me wants to beat him to a pulp, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he has caused me. But another part of me knows that violence won't solve anything, that it won't undo what has been done. I finally force myself to get out of the car. My legs feel like lead as I make my way to room 203. I raise my fist to knock, but then hesitate. What am I hoping to accomplish here? What good will this do? But I've come this far. I can't turn back now. I knock on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. There's a long pause, and then the door opens. Dan is standing there, looking disheveled and unshaven. He looks surprised to see me, but there's something else in his eyes, fear, maybe, or guilt. "Jake," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I say, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "We need to talk." He steps aside, letting me in. The room is small and dingy, with peeling wallpaper and a musty smell. I can see a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the nightstand, and cigarette butts litter the floor. This is what Dan's life has become. A mess, just like always. "Why, Dan?" I ask, turning to face him. "Why did you do it? Why, Rachel?" He sighs, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Jake. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I'm sorry." "Sorry," I scoff. "You're sorry? You slept with my wife, Dan. You got her pregnant. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it." "I know," he says, his voice cracking. "I know I messed up. I never wanted to hurt you, Jake. You have to believe me." I want to believe him, want to believe that he didn't mean to destroy my life, but I can't. "Not this time. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Dan," I say, my voice thick with emotion. "You've taken everything from me. Everything." He looks down, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm leaving town," he says after a long pause. "I'm going to try to get my life together, start fresh somewhere else. I think it's best for everyone." I nod, not trusting myself to speak. Maybe it is for the best. Maybe it's the only way I can start to heal, to move on from this nightmare. "Just go, Dan," I say finally. "Go and don't ever come back." He nods, picking up his bag. "I'm sorry, Jake," he says one last time before walking out the door. I stand there, staring at the empty room, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. Maybe now, with Dan gone, I can start to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. The months pass slowly. Rachel and I barely speak, each of us lost in our own pain, our own guilt. The baby is born in the middle of a cold December night.